Alright, let's cut to the chase. Food costs are out of control. I'm not the only one who's noticed my grocery bill going sky high over the past few years. I love shopping for sales and deals, but today I'm going to take it one step further. It's the beginning of a series I'm calling Chopped for Cheap. The idea is to cook a complete meal using only items from the store that are on sale. So a complete meal is something that any average person off the street would consider to be a lunch or a dinner. I'm not going to count a basic scrambled egg, for example. I want it to be something I have to cook, multi-step, multi-ingredient, just to give you an idea of my process. And before we get started, a few ground rules. So number one, there's going to be a few things that I'm not going to buy. So, for example, basic spices, salt, pepper, garlic powder, things like that. Now these pantry staples will also include basic things like cooking oil. So olive oil, neutral oil, butter, for example, flour I'm not going to include. If you don't have these in your pantry, that's okay, you can go buy them, but if there's any kind of deviations or changes to the rules, I'll let you know. But if you have any questions or suggestions, let me know in the comments. Give me some ideas. This video is going to break down my entire process. So from going to the store, finding things that are on sale, developing a recipe in my head, maybe some pivots, we'll see, and also how I cook things and my technique going into that. It should give you an idea of how I approach making a dish, how I approach making a recipe, and what I use for inspiration to get me there. I hope this inspires you to do some bargain bin hunting of your own at your local grocery store, and let's get to it. Right off the bat, I'm seeing potatoes, which is great because they're useful for a base as a side dish or even in a main. So it's good to have these. I'm gonna grab a few. Mushrooms, also good to have. Now I'm thinking maybe we'll do some kind of sauce, like a mushroom brown sauce to go with a protein. Looking for aromatics now, no garlic, but onions are on sale. So I'm gonna grab a few of these. And even if we pivot a little bit to something different, having onions is pretty much always useful for any recipe. So I'm gonna grab a couple of these. Found a pepper here as well. A little expensive, but good to have for color and sweetness. And I saw the celery. So now I'm thinking maybe we'll do a soup, because we have kind of like a mirepoix, or maybe some kind of stew. Let's look for our meat here. So now I'm looking for something that's gonna be good for a long stew, something lean. And I found this London broil, which is a great cut of meat, very lean and usually very cheap. So that'll do well in a long braise. So I'm gonna grab this. And now I'm thinking I need some kind of stock or a broth to go with it. So let's take a look there. Unfortunately, nothing on sale here, but I was able to find these bouillon cubes, which will create chicken stock for us. And that'll be almost as good and also very cheap. So now I'm thinking I need to enrich this somehow. Normally I would use like a red wine or something, but no luck there. So I found this tomato paste, so I'm gonna grab that, which will do kind of the job. Now I'm looking at pasta to add a little extra heft to our dish, and these egg noodles are on sale. So now I'm thinking maybe we can do kind of like a beef stew stroganoff type idea. And the one thing that you need for that is a sour cream, and I got very lucky and found them on sale. So I'm gonna grab one of these tubs and use that to enrich our stock a little bit. And that's it. So let's go ahead and head back and I will break down the food costs for you. Okay, I have returned. So let's see what we got. Okay, quick price rundown here. So the sour cream was $1.99. The steak altogether, London broil, was $9.98. The egg noodles were $2.50, and the chicken bouillon was $2.50 as well. The celery was $1.49. Potatoes were $2.53. Tomato paste was $1.39. The pepper was $1.50. The onions were $1.53, and the mushrooms were $2. So our total was $27.41. Okay, so let me walk you through my idea around actually creating this recipe for myself. So as I mentioned, I was kind of thinking loosely about doing a soup originally, but when I came to the beef stew, here's the first recipe that I checked. This is from New York Times, from Molly O'Neill here, very basic recipe. So as I'm going through, I'm looking at the ingredients and just checking to see if there's anything I'm missing. The beef broth, so that's when I realized I need to get this guy here for the wine. And I was thinking, well, what if I make it more like a stroganoff? So then I came across this recipe. So this is from Modern Crumb, and then our sour cream sauce here is what I'm looking at. This is also similar to a paprikash, if you've made one of those. And again, these are things that I think about because I have some experience cooking and making different types of recipes. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about things that I've made, things that I could use these ingredients for. And so stroganoff and pepper ketch both came to mind when I was thinking about this. I think we have enough to combine these two recipes more or less. I'm gonna add a few more seasonings here. Probably gonna add some paprika to be similar to the pepper ketch to the sauce. For me, I think it makes the most sense to do it in an Instant Pot because I think it's gonna save the most time and it just is less mess and it's a little easier to work with. So let's get to it. I'm gonna go ahead and start prepping these ingredients. Here's my seasonings for this recipe. So starting up top here, I have 2 teaspoons of paprika. This is 2 teaspoons of salt. This is about 1 teaspoon or so of black pepper, 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, 4 tablespoons of vinegar, and 2 tablespoons of soy sauce. This is optional. You could also add some Worcestershire sauce if you want. Mainly I'm adding it because I like the color, the browning will be nicer, and it adds a little bit of umami. And then we also have these 2 guys here, which are our Knorr chicken bouillon cubes. And then I also have over here about, this is like half a cup or so of flour. Next up, we're going to process our vegetables. As always, your first step should be to thoroughly wash everything. You don't have to soak them in vinegar or anything like that, but just make sure you scrub off any of that surface dirt. Like our celery here was pretty dirty, so I wanted to make sure that was somewhat clean before we cut it up. Grab a bowl of water for your potatoes to avoid any browning, and grab another bowl to store the rest of your vegetables. For our bell pepper, we're going for a medium dice, but it doesn't have to be super precise. Since we're planning on braising the meat for a couple of hours, most of our vegetables are going to soften and almost melt into the sauce. Just chop them up into a somewhat uniform size, but don't worry about making it too perfect. So same thing here for the celery. Since these ribs are somewhat large, I split them down the middle before chopping. You'll notice we're only using 2 ribs here from the head, but you could probably use the whole head. I just think the flavor might be a little overpowering sometimes, and I didn't want to overcrowd the pot. Again, a medium dice like this is fine. I'm using red onions here because they were on sale, obviously, but you can use whatever you have. Give them a quick chop and you can throw them in the bowl with your celery and peppers since they're all going to be sauteed together. And finally, our potatoes. I'm not going to bother peeling these, but you can absolutely do that if you prefer. As you're chopping, just drop the cut potatoes into a water bath so they don't oxidize. We're not using these until after the pressure cook, so they need to sit for at least a couple of hours. If you forget though, and the potatoes turn brown, it's not a big deal. The sauce is going to be brown anyway, so it won't really matter that much in the long run. Now that we're finished with the vegetables, we can cut the beef. As you saw earlier, I grabbed 2 London broil steaks. If you're unfamiliar with this cut, you might know it as a top round steak. They're usually cut somewhat thin and they have very little fat marbling, making them ideal for low and slow cooking. We're going for bite-sized chunks here. Remember that the meat will shrink a little bit once it cooks, so I like to make them a little bit bigger when I'm first cutting. Now drop the chunks in the flour and evenly coat them. This will help the browning and also thicken our sauce a bit. I also like to season the flour as well as the meat, just to start building the flavor and make sure we get an even saltiness throughout the dish. And that's it for the prep. So now we can start cooking. I'm going to use an Instant Pot today, but you can use a Dutch oven or a stock pot if you prefer. If you want to go that route, you'll probably want to simmer for at least 3 hours, I'd say. We'll start by putting the pot in a saute mode and drizzling in a couple teaspoons of olive oil, and you're going to place your floured steak in a single layer. Do not overcrowd the pan here. We want to develop some browning on each side, so the pieces need to make good contact with the pan. Turn and flip until you get some color on all sides. So you don't have to go for a super hard sear here, since we're planning on stewing everything down, but this step will help develop better flavor in the end, and will also take that edge off the raw flour flavor. The other goal here is to develop a good fond at the bottom of the pan, so we can preserve it during our deglazing process. Also, you may have noticed I forgot to cut my mushrooms. Well, thankfully I remembered before we started pressurizing the pot, so we'll go ahead and chop those up now. We only need about half the carton, so you can save the rest for another recipe. I'm going for a thin slice on these, but you can leave them larger if you want mushroom chunks in your sauce. So now that we're actually done with the prep, let's get our vegetables cooking. You can see all that fond we've developed in the bottom of the pan. We want that in our sauce, so we have to deglaze. Drop your vegetables in with some olive oil and a pinch of salt to help coax out some of that water, and use a wooden spoon to scrape the bottom of the pot. Once everything's softened, you can pour in the vinegar and soy sauce and continue scraping. When all the fond has released, you can drop on your mushrooms. I like to add these towards the end of my sautés since mushrooms can act like a sponge and sometimes suck up all the oil and liquids in the pan. Continue cooking and stirring for a few minutes until the mushrooms soften a bit. Now we're going to add our stock. And remember how we bought those chicken bouillon cubes earlier? 1 cube is good for about 2 cups of water, so we'll go for 4 cups of water and 2 cubes. Let's go ahead and add the rest of our dry seasonings here as well. So that's the garlic powder, paprika, pepper, and salt. Give everything a good stir to combine and make sure the chicken bouillon is fully dissolved. And now you're going to open up your can of tomato paste and add about 2 tablespoons. You can save the rest for another recipe. Stir once again to incorporate the paste and give it a quick taste for seasoning. And remember that you're going to reduce everything down at the end to thicken the sauce, so you should aim to undershoot the salt levels slightly. Now gently drop on your steak, and don't forget to include the drippings. Make sure all the meat is nestled into the broth, and then cover your Instant Pot. Cook on high pressure for 1.5 hours, but it'll probably take about 2 since the pressure has to come up. And now's a good time to clean up a bit and do the dishes. Okay, so the pressure cook is complete, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off the Instant Pot entirely. Let it sit for a little bit just to naturally depressurize. I let mine go for about 20 minutes before releasing the pressure valve, but you could leave it longer if you want the meat to be even more tender. Just make sure that steam valve is pointed away from your face and anything you don't want to get blasted, for example, a camera. Once it's safe, open your pot and grab a piece of meat with your spoon to check the consistency. Mine got pretty tender, but if you're looking for something even softer, you could always go for another hour or so. If you're happy with your meats, go ahead and drain the potatoes and drop them in. We're going to use the Instant Pot saute function to boil them and also reduce the sauce. That leftover starch will also help thicken things up a bit. At this point, it's a good time to taste for seasoning again and just to make sure you're not missing anything important. I was pretty happy with how things were shaping up, so I went ahead and started simmering the cooked potatoes and further reducing the sauce. You'll want to simmer this uncovered for about half an hour, or until the potatoes are cooked to your liking. I like mine to still have a bit of firmness to them, so that's why I waited until after the pressure cook to add them. To finish things off, we're going to add our sour cream. For a dish this size, I'm going to add about half a cup. Keep in mind that we're also going to top the finished dish with a dollop, so don't go overboard here. You can always add more later, but you can't take it out once you mix it in. This next technique is one that I learned while cooking chicken paprikash. Sometimes if you add something cold like sour cream to a piping hot sauce, it can get clumpy. And I want my sauce to be smooth, so we're going to temper it by adding sauce to the cream little by little. This gives us a chance to work out any clumps and ensures that we get a nice even consistency. Since the sauce wasn't quite as thick as I wanted, I'm also going to add a couple tablespoons of flour into this mix. Whisk it in to combine, and then add everything into the sauce. I'm looking for a stew-like consistency that clings to the beef, so this was perfect. And that's it for the stew. If you just want a big bowl of meat and vegetables, you could absolutely just eat it as is, but I was going for more of a stroganoff vibe. So I boiled out some of our egg noodles that we bought earlier to serve as a base. Just make sure you cook them all the way through per the package instructions, since we won't be finishing them in the stew. I used a little over half the bag here, but I actually think I probably could have just cooked the entire thing, considering all the leftovers we had. Oh, and if you're not as keen on noodles, this would also be great over a bowl of rice. Alright, well, all that's left is a taste test. Let's see how we did. Got a bowl here, put some noodles in. No, that's probably too much. It seems like a more reasonable amount. Okay. Put that up there. And top it off with a little extra sauce. You know, I think it looks pretty good. It's not half bad. Take a little bit of our extra sour cream here. Let's do a little dollop on the top. There. So that. For about $6 a bowl, it's not too bad. Cheers. Just don't burn my tongue so bad. That's not bad. Could be better. I mean, it's missing garlic, obviously. Couldn't add that. A little parsley would have been nice, some kind of greens on top, but I think considering the cost, it's pretty good. And there's a ton left in this pot, so I think this will probably get us maybe 5, even 6 portions. So that's pretty good. I'm gonna say for like $6 a bowl, portion-wise, the whole thing was about $27. It's pretty good. Okay, so it's the next day. There's a few things we learned. This right here is our beef stew from yesterday. It's about 2 liters, maybe like 2 1/4 quarts. And this is actually after, I'd say, about 6 full bowls of stew. So I think this might be more than 4 servings, might be closer to 6, depending on how hungry people are. I did want to run through our leftover ingredients here. So I used all of our veggies. We have a little bit of our egg noodles left here. There are 22 cubes of this bad boy left, so I'll use that for some stocks or seasonings. These are good for rice as well, so if you want to throw that in a pot of boiling rice, great way to flavor it. About half of this pint container of mushrooms, which I'll probably use in something else. Maybe I'm not sure actually, in a sauce maybe. There's a little bit more than half of this tomato paste left, which I need to use in something because it's going to go bad. And then the sour cream, which we're also using for topping, probably about half the container. I don't know if you can see that. I don't want to spill it, but yeah. So quite a bit of leftover ingredients left, but as far as the fresh stuff, more or less we used everything except for the mushrooms. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy with how things came out. I don't think it's a gourmet, amazing recipe. If you're gonna be feeding your family something simple and you wanna go with something cheap, I think it's a great idea. I think it's this beef stew / stroganoff is very hearty, it's very filling, and it's very cheap, surprisingly. So that's it for episode 1. If you learned something, please feel free to drop a like on the video. It helps me out a ton. Drop a comment if you have any questions. And if you like this content, feel free to subscribe. I drop shorts 2 times a week, and I'm gonna be making long form videos probably once or twice a month from now on. So I would love to see you join our community, and stay tuned. All right, take care.